I'm Sharon Spurlock. I'm the Senior Director of Family Support at the St. Louis ARC, and I'm really excited about tonight's presentation topic, Building a Circle of Support. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with an introduction of our panelists before we open a PowerPoint. I want everybody to be able to get to know who's going to be talking to you today. So my role in family supports is to make sure I'm assisting individuals and families plan for the great life they want, not only when they're little bitty kids, but all the way through their teenage years, adult life, and on into their life as they age and maybe mom and dad are gone. So there's a lot of times we're talking about who's in this person's life that's going to support them during that entire span to make sure that they are healthy, happy, and have access to the best support for making decisions. So I find this topic to be really challenging for a lot of families. So I'm very excited that we have some folks with us tonight who have taken steps on their own to create a circle of support. So I'm going to start off with my partner in workshops quite a bit, Debra Fiasco.
Good evening. My name is Debra Fiasco, and I am a parent. First and foremost, I worked in the field of developmental disabilities for about 30 years. I'm in a variety of roles with direct service providers with the state of Missouri with the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And currently I work for Special School District in the Parent Education Program. I find this topic to be very important when we're looking at how to support families. We know that only about 16% of families, once they leave us in Special School District, are receiving paid supports from a state agency. So as family members, it really is our responsibility, and sometimes our sorrow and sometimes our joy to really set our children up for success. So I'm happy to be here tonight and happy to talk about the circle of support.
Thank you, Debra. I really appreciate that. And Erica Axelbaum, thank you for being a first-time guest. Hi.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Erica Axelbaum. I have an 18-year-old daughter named Emma with an intellectual disability. And I realized fairly quickly that I could not do this alone. Our hopes and dreams for her were big, and I knew that I needed help. So I'd love to share with you tonight how we went about that as a little girl up until now, and then what our plans are to really more formalize her circle of support as she enters the real workforce and has her own place to live, we hope.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited to hear all of your stories. And I'm glad to be able to talk about this through that continuum of life, because I think you have opportunities at every stage of life to start making friends, to build relationships. And honestly, I think this is the perfect time for us to be having this conversation. I think over the last 18 months, a lot of people have recognized how important relationships are in their lives. A lot of people have changed their focus and their priorities. And so we can look at this through a lens of real positivity and community building as we look at how to draw more people in. So we can look at some information along the way, and we'll answer your questions as they come up if they apply kind of where we are in the presentation. Please do be patient, and if I know we're going to get to something in a couple minutes, then I will hold your question and bring it to the table shortly. So I wanted to start off with this quote from Jean Vanier, and I think it's so powerful. Our starting point grows from a deep understanding that the building of relationships with people who are vulnerable is a gift for us all. We are not just doing it for or to someone else, we are doing it for ourselves. This is the foundation from which we build. And Jean Vanier is the founder of the L'Arche communities, which are communities around the world that are built around intentional relationships between people with and without disabilities. And the reason I brought this up today is that I think so often families express to me that they're asking people to do something that doesn't have any value for the other person. And as a person that doesn't have a family member with a disability, I feel like my role is to be here to represent people that don't have a disability, I don't have a family member with a disability, but recognize the beauty and the joy in relationships with people with disabilities. And that doesn't make me patient or special or any of those other things that people that don't understand what I do call me. It makes me a human who values certain things in certain people, and they might have a disability or they might not. So I hope that that's the framework we can take as we move forward today and really think about what is it that our family members offer that is beautiful that might be worth sharing with other people. So when we talk about a circle of support, this is the official definition of what that means. It's a group of people who come together to help formulate, promote, and support the goals of a person with a disability. They act as a community of friendship and support around the person who is at the center of the planning and the center of the decision making. It's a means of providing practical advice, solving problems, and generating creative ideas to contribute positively to the person's life. So a circle can be really informal. It might be your group of friends that come together over coffee once a month, and you are sharing with each other, and you each take turns offering support to help out with going to a doctor's appointment or gathering some kind of information or helping somebody to drive. Or it can be very formal, and you can have formal meetings where you talk through goals that the person has, barriers that you come upon, and everything in between. So really it's the content of the activities that are going to make the difference in a circle of support. And you know, Debra started to talk about this. What are the benefits of building a circle? It increases connections and positive relationships, and we all want that. I listened to a podcast today on my way home from Kansas City, and the people in the podcast were talking about how we used to have communities that took care of each other. And if you saw the neighbor's kid doing something that they weren't maybe supposed to be doing, somebody stepped in and said something. And neighbors noticed if somebody was sick and might need a meal brought over. And unfortunately, I think we've drifted away from that for a lot of reasons, but we have opportunities now. And again, I feel COVID has created an opportunity around this where people are seeking out more community and more relationships. It builds continuity and security for a person to have more resources to seek out. It's more creative to problem solve when you've got several heads at the table offering diverse ideas. You have a much better way to react and respond in an emergency, and really better decision making because you are seeing all sides and you've got multiple options often. Erica will talk about involving others in thinking and planning for the present and the future, and really having a bigger understanding of what that person's life might be like. And again, that group of people that cares enough to be looking out for somebody. The truth of the matter is that the bigger a circle of support around a person, the least likely they are to be abused in any way, because there's people that know them, that are looking out for them, and that are going to speak up if something just doesn't feel right. And it also makes the person with a disability grow in their own confidence and be able to speak up for themselves and promote their own interests. I'm going to stop talking for a minute and see if Erica or Debra wants to chime in with any comments about these benefits.
I can say that at first I was really reluctant to ask people to help because some of the things that were difficult with Emma were things that I wasn't sure I wanted or have people see. And then as her difficulties and problems became bigger and more difficult, I realized I could not do this alone and that I really did need help. And I had to be vulnerable and let people in. And then when they were let in, they were grateful that I trusted them enough to let them in. And it was hard because Emma was on a feeding tube for a long time and heart rate monitor and all those things. And I was afraid to leave the house, but I needed to. I needed to trust that somebody else could tube feed her. And in the end, the people that I let in are now definitely part of her circle. We call it circle of friends. And they're really attached to her, and she's very attached to those people. Debra?
Oh, I agree. I think that's one of the hurdles for all of us as family members, whether it's your child or an aging parent. I've had the experience of having a family member, being a parent, and being a spouse of somebody with a disability. And if I'm always in control and I'm always in charge, I can make sure that they're safe. And it's really easy to get into that way of thinking it always has to be me, that I have to do all of it. But I can't, and I shouldn't, because other people coming into our loved one's life push them in a way that as a family member, I might have my own fears that I bring to the table that stops their learning experience, that stops the level of independence that they might be able to reach. When somebody who's even just a little bit more removed and says, it doesn't have to be me, it's not my family member, it's my friend, or it's my friend's family member that can jump in. And I agree with Erica. When I've been asked to be involved in other people's lives, and again, I've been in this field for a really long time. I've watched some of my little first steps babies that came home from the NICU are now big men that are grown and tower over me. It's very flattering to have someone say to you, I trust you as someone I love. I trust your help in making a decision. I trust your help in a hands-on activity. I trust that you are part of their lives and part of my life. And it enriches not just your loved one's life, but it enriches yours as well.
Beautifully said. And you know what? That really made me think, Debra, because I have done this work with my 86-year-old mother, and she built her own circle of friends. But I've reached out to them and made asks. So she had people around her, but she would not ask for any assistance. So I was her go-between to do some of those things. So that's always an option you have, is to find somebody that can help you speak up. All right. So I want to start off, as most of you know, I'm a huge fan of charting the life course. And so I think it's really important to be thinking about what your vision for the future is. And I think both Erica and Debra alluded to this, that what you might want for your family member might be a big vision, or maybe bringing more people in to think about what it is you want can make it an even bigger vision for the future. But thinking about what vision you have for their future really can guide your thoughts about relationships. Because if you want them to have a great social life and they're 6 years old right now, there might be some relationships you want to start building with your peers. And we had somebody in the chat bar ask if it's okay to bring children into somebody's circle of friendship. And I give that a resounding yes. My inspiration really for doing this workshop was Micah Fialka Feldman, who is an amazing self-advocate who works at the University of New York at Syracuse. And Micah, his mom started inviting his third grade classmates over for pizza and social activities. And they started interjecting what they thought Micah should be doing for fun and where they thought Micah could get things going that weren't happening for him. And over the course of years, she started inviting them even to formal meetings like IEPs. And some of those people are still engaged with him. So I think it's really important to think about that vision for the future. And also maybe what you don't want. If you don't want your family member to be alone and vulnerable, that might also give you the motivation to think about, where can I start making things happen that are going to move them towards this vision that I want?
Yeah, I think the other really important thing, because Sharon and I both done work with family members where the parent or the caregiver has a vision, and then the person themselves has a very different vision or has a different way of getting to that vision. And so listening to your loved one and saying what is important to you and who is important to you and what is your vision, how do we want to get there, and helping them shape those things is so vitally important. I found that I'm always surprised by sometimes the insight that people have about their own lives. But then to help shape that and to help encourage it and to figure out what it is in the moving forward, what it is from the past experiences that we need to draw on, and how that vision can really be fulfilled with the levels of support from other people and not just you.
And I think really important too that if your child has a vision and you help them plan to make that vision a reality and it fail, that is an absolutely wonderful experience to go through, because they have to learn how to get through failure. I have a typically developing daughter. She has to learn to get through failure too. So I think a lot of times we think, oh, this is a child with special needs, so that's the reason why there's going to be a failure. Well, the truth is a lot of typically developing kids fail too. So you can't just say this is because they have special. I think it's kind of like my daughter had horrendous behavior. And I saw quote unquote typically developing kids with horrendous behavior too. So I guess that's my point. We just can't blame everything on that. Now, I came to find out later that there were some things wrong and that's what was causing the behavior. But I think it's important to have the failures too, is my point.
Oh my gosh, Erica, it's like I planted you here. So if you want to learn how to be able to handle your child's having experiences, taking a few risks, and maybe stumbling a little bit, we do a wonderful full day training called Joyzen, and our next session's coming up September 11th, and it's just for parents and other caregivers to really learn what emotional triggers are happening for them as their kids are taking steps forward and trying new things and maybe not always being successful. So I love that. And we did have a question from somebody in the audience about helping to build skills. And I think this really pertains in this section, because if you want to have relationships and you've got something behaviorally going on, if you're struggling to make friends, that feels like a time to really tackle some of that.
We call it failing forward. And that's an important thing that we do, is drill down and problem solve about how to make things better and how to do things different and how to learn from the challenges that are set forth. Because if I only we also call it in my household forgive or forget. So if I can't forget something, I'm going to forgive it, whether it's something that I didn't do or I did. I have to learn to forgive myself. And teaching your loved one the same thing, that mistakes will happen, is absolutely a great way to help them grow. And I think for us to grow as well.
I think for the skill building, if we're talking about social skills, I think one of the best things you can do is, say it's when Emma was little, I really like she needed to do what everybody else was doing. So there were no options to say, oh, my balance is bad, so I'm not going to play volleyball, or I have a vision, so I'm not going to shoot baskets. No, that doesn't work that way. Everybody does it when you're in school. And if you fail, that's fine. I think when she was younger and she had to negotiate the social world with a lack of language and a lack of self-regulation, working with the teachers and working with the parents of the kids she wanted to hang out with or play t-ball with or went to gymnastics with, I would have a very honest conversation, would say, this is the deal. This is what could happen. Want you to be prepared. this kind of a tantrum is really difficult to watch, but this could happen, but I need your help. I need this girl to figure out how to negotiate these difficult social situations, and I'll be right there, and I'll provide the language for her. And most parents all were very, very helpful with that. In the neighborhood, if the kids were out riding bikes, she can't ride a bike, specialized scooter type thing that she could ride. Talk to the parents in the neighborhood. This is the deal. This is what could happen. But I need her to participate in the social life of this neighborhood. She's growing up with these children. So what can we do? And we came up with a list of activities like riding these bikes, shooting baskets, allowing their child to come into my home to do pretend play or a cooking activity or sewing activity or whatever. And eventually these neighborhood families grew to trust me, and their connection to Emma is still there today, even though we don't even live in the same neighborhood. They will drive to our home and walk the neighborhood with her, ride her over to play. We might drop her off over there. Relationships still exist today, and they are actually her references for jobs we will that we've applied her to.
Oh my gosh, that is just, I just could sit and talk about what you just said for the whole rest of the session. And I appreciate so much the vulnerability of doing that. And I'm curious, Erica, did you have existing relationships with those neighbors? Did you just walk out there? How did you approach them and make it an experience that you got such positive results? Was it positive with everybody? Were there stumbles? How did that work?
Well, I think one of our biggest hopes and dreams for Emma was that she became as independent as possible, as early as possible, with every single skill. If the other children in class were learning to tie shoes, the OT needed to get in there and help her learn how to tie shoes. So I very much was an advocate for her. I will tell you, my sidebar is I am a special school district teacher. So I knew the IEP process. I knew what to expect. So I needed her to be in a really good school district. So sacrificing all financially was to move into a very good neighborhood with a very good school district. And we lived without in order to pay the mortgage. We just lived without, because both girls having a really good education was the priority. So the hope and dream was, I think we got to move out of where we live now in order for her to have those opportunities. And so the goals were always, and the hopes and dreams were independence as early as possible, and always, always, always above all else, and I even mean academics, was meaningful, reciprocal relationships. Meaningful and reciprocal. And that means Emma had her part of the relationship to learn how to do too. So we moved into this new neighborhood, and right away people came out, not a lot, just wanted to meet. And so we moved in, we got comfortable in the house, we got comfortable in the neighborhood, had Emma outside, and Emma was obviously had special needs because of behavior. And I knew our neighbors could probably hear her having a tantrum. And I know they saw her outside. So in a nutshell, I had to tell these neighbors what we had been through and what still needed to be done. And that we would love their help. If there's ever a problem with Emma and their children, you've got to let us know, but that I will be around until I know that Emma can handle herself. I'm not going to send Emma out without me being there. I'll be there. When you all feel comfortable, then let me know. And then they got comfortable. They let me know. They would invite Emma into their homes. And it all worked out pretty well. Yeah, were there neighbors who were like, holy moly, these people need to learn how to parent. And then they found out we were both teachers. Then they were like, holy moly, these people can't even handle their own child. I'm not sure that we want to let our kids be involved with that little girl. And I decided, I'll try a few times and then I need to move on.
Mhm.
Those
I
maybe
think
aren't the people
letting
that I
go of
want in
those
her life.
people is,
Yeah.
that's a really powerful part of it. Again, I feel like the universe is driving me in certain directions today. I went to pick up dinner before this, and there was a woman who I couldn't even tell if she was in line in front of me. She kept huffing up to the line and then huffing away from the line. And I started making up stories in my head about what was going on with her. And she was so rude and she was so this. And then she went over a little bit further, and I realized that she was with a young man who I think probably had some mental health problems going on. And she was trying really hard to get him to let her order some food so they could sit down and have a discussion together. And for whatever reason, he didn't want food from that restaurant. And I watched it all play out, and I had created my own story about her before I saw all of this. And as you're talking, Erica, I just think for all of you listening, you have a chance to create your story and tell your story to the people that you want your family members to be connected to. And if you don't, they're going to watch what they're going to see, what they see, and they're going to create their own stories. So I love the fact that you were vulnerable and that you went out and said, here's the story, and here's what we need for everybody in this neighborhood to live together happily and for Emma to have a great life. So that's what a great story. Thank you so much.
Can I add one thing that Emma does not have, Emma has very rare diagnoses, and she's not the typical child with special needs that you immediately, because of how she looks, you might wonder, but you're not quite sure. So her disabilities, her diagnoses are not really clear. Like you don't see them, they're not outward. So then when people would watch us at first, they would think, well, that kid's probably normal, or maybe, I don't know, why are they allowing this? So it was hard as a mother to have my child stared at for behavior. But then if there was a child that was more visibly, obviously disabled, there was more compassion.
Mm-hmm.
They got more compassion than I did, and God love them. They should get all the compassion they can. But for those parents that have kids that are not as obviously disabled, but disabled, it can be tricky.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And you know what I took away from today's little episode at the restaurant was I still have lessons to learn, and I need to work on my skills about being judgmental. So there was nothing about that family that was wrong. Everything that needed to be worked on was in me. So, and I think that you give people that opportunity to work past whatever preconceived ideas they have that aren't serving them or anybody else. Who do you think might be the people that you would be participating in this circle? How can you connect interest and availability? And maybe what are the pressing needs that you might motivate you to be vulnerable and address them? And I really want to give folks an idea before we're going to do an activity, everybody, so prepare. But before we do the activity, if Debra, first you, and then Erica, if you could just talk about maybe a specific area where you asked people to help in certain ways. And Erica, you've already done that in regards to some of the play activities for your daughter, but let's just walk through kind of how you decided who to ask and how to do it. Debra, let's start with you.
So again, I started with my family member and asked, who is it that you would like to help make these decisions? If it's not me, or if it's not one of your siblings, who would it be? And we talked a lot. And of course, as parents, we worry about health and safety a lot. And that's where we started, with health and safety. And picking out family members that had those levels of expertise was where we started. So I have a nephew who is a nurse, a very compassionate young man who is very thoughtful. And when we approached him and said, "You're a nurse, can you be the person to help make some of the medical decisions or help describe or explain some of the medical decisions? Even as a young man, he was thrilled to be thought of, to have that. Looked at other family members who had areas of expertise in financial and said, you know, you're really good with money, and if they need help, can you be the one to help them? And again, discussing it as, you know, you have to really be able to trust somebody. And we moved out. So we started with that inner circle. We started with our immediate family. We worked out to our siblings and aunts and uncles and cousins. And then I looked at some of the people in my life who I'm not related to at all. Friends and friends, parents' friends. I recently reconnected with some of my parents' friends' children. Is that too far?
Mm-hmm.
Because I needed to build that circle of support for my mom, who, like Sharon's mom, is 86. And so she might tell her friend something that she's not going to tell me. So building that circle there. When my grandmother was in a nursing home, we built a circle of who's going to be at lunch or who's going to be at dinner, what days of the week, so that we could watch over each other's loved one. So I think there's really structured ways to do it. I think some of them can be paid supports. Absolutely. I have it now down. Who does my taxes, who all of those paid supports that are in my life and to go to, but then also working out from my family into friends, faith-based community, who is in my church or who are in my social circle groups that could be not everything to my child, but that one thing, and then asking, being very purposeful and asking and saying, would you be that person? And making sure that there's at least a little bit of formality to it, so that we all know we're all on the same page.
I think that's a really great point, because sometimes you're nervous about asking. So you ask in a real circular way, and the other person may walk away not really knowing what your expectations are. So being very deliberate about your ask and finding the time and the words and preparing sound like really important pieces.
Yeah, we're really purposeful in planning things for like vacations and our retirement and other things in our life. I wouldn't just look at pictures of Hawaii without doing any of the things to get there. I would be saving money. I would be getting whatever else in line so that I could take that vacation. Our loved ones' lives are much longer than a vacation and much more important. So it does take a purposeful activity. But I've also found that some of my friends are doing the same things. They're not just building that circle of support for their children, but we're building those circles of support for ourselves. I became a widow, and my circle of support was very tied to my spouse. And that was a hard thing then to kind of pull myself up and to ask for help. So I think it's a great experience doing it for yourself. I think you learn a lot, but building those circles of supports for all of our loved ones, even the neighbors. I think COVID has really changed things. I used to hit my garage door opener, come in, hit my garage door opener, and I was in the house. Now I had to go out in the yard because I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. I talk to all the neighbors now. I know their dogs. They check in on me. And so, but it was a purposeful activity, and it was hard at first.
Can you give us an example of a deliberate ask you made?
Well, like the health one was a deliberate one. The other thing was, I know nothing about cars. I know Sharon has been through this with me. I didn't want to even go to transportation, but other people pushed me towards it. And so I approached a brother-in-law and said, will you help with this? We're doing the same thing with employment is going to, because sometimes they want to problem solve with somebody else. Sometimes it's not about those big decisions. Sometimes they just need to hear it from somebody else that's not your family member, not your close family member. The circle of support with my child's friends. Sometimes they check in with their friends just to see, is mom off base? And I encourage that. And sometimes they come back and say, yeah, nobody agreed with you, mom. They don't think that's a good decision. Okay. Do what you need to do and we'll problem solve if it was a bad decision.
I like that too, that you can feel comfortable saying that you're not always right, because that's so key in these discussions. Erica, how about you? As you listened to Debra, did it spark anything for you?
Yeah, a lot is pretty similar. One thing I would add is Emma really has chosen a lot of her people. I have not. She in the neighborhood has gotten to know a lot of different people all on her own. She had a friend for about a month that I had never even met, and it ends up being that they have a little girl, and Emma babysits this little girl. If the mom is home, Emma is in the home with the little girl. Her name is Poppy. But if the mom has to have the meeting outside of the home, I go over there. And this is all, remember, Emma's 18. So we're trying to build skills. Emma also met a family and she now watches their dog whenever they go out of town. And she's established that relationship. There's another here, another neighbor there, and they're from our old neighborhood. So Emma really has been in charge. So your child may know better than you. And then I did have honest conversations with all these new people in her life about, what I expect and what I'm not comfortable with. As her legal guardian now, there are some things I'm comfortable with, some things I'm not comfortable with. So just again, being open, honest, direct, in developing a relationship with these people as well, but letting Emma be the lead person in that relationship. I'm just secondary. I make sure she knows, and she lets me know they are my friends. They're not yours. So I think that's important too. And I think right now where we're at with circle of support with her circles of friends is that she does live with me. So I help her with a lot of things, but there are skills that if I teach her, nah, not going to go. If Aunt Betsy comes over, it's a no-brainer. And so I know who to ask for her nails. I know who to ask for laundry. I know who to ask to clean her room. That doesn't do it for her, because that's one thing you can't do in our house is I've said this since she was little. I don't do things for you that you can do for yourself. And that means everything from putting away your toys when she was 2 to tying her shoes when she was 5 or 6 to, doing her laundry now and keeping her room clean now. But I know when the fight is not worth it. And I find somebody within the circle, whether they're new to the circle or they've been in the circle for a long time, reach out and ask for help.
What do you say?
I say, I need help. Emma's refusing to do her laundry and doesn't want to wash the underwear that's soiled because she doesn't want to touch it. And she soiled it. She's got to pick it up and put it in the washer. I mean, she's 18. I can't. Now, if she were 10, at 10, I wouldn't have expected that. I would have never asked her to do that at 10. But at 18, yeah, you've got to learn, because if you really, she has expressed a desire to have her own condo. And if you want to have your own condo, we sat and made a list of what are the things you're going to need to do totally on your own. And one is do your laundry, even the laundry you don't want to do. And dishes, even the ones that you let new and sunflower seed butter sit in for 24 hours, you're still going to have to learn how to scrub that. Like if you can't do these things, you can't live in a condo.
There's that
So-
connection to that vision for the future. I love that. So
Emma,
Erica, how on earth did you find somebody that's willing to help her wash laundry? Was there something about that person that made them the right person to ask?
It's Aunt Laura. Aunt Laura was the very first, when I went back to work part-time after I for a few years with Emma, because her health was really critical and questionable. But when I did go back part-time, Aunt Laura was the one that I thought immediately could handle, a heart monitor, a feeding tube, a gavage feeding and pump feeding. And as we were transitioning from totally tube fed to feeding by mouth, I knew Aunt Laura would follow the protocol that we had from the OT. And she knew that I was the kind of mom that said, it just has to be done. No matter what it takes. Do you have 30 different things in your refrigerator that you can put on that tray? And she would say, absolutely. So I happen to have the right person.
So interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking about actually one of our participants tonight has a different kind of circle. It's a circle of parents that support each other, and they kind of take turns rotating different roles of learning things. But I've been in groups where certain parents will take over the cooking part of working with both of their family's kids on cooking, and a different parent works on lawn care or riding a bike safely in the neighborhood or whatever. And everybody kind of taps their own strengths and shares the load. So that's another kind of way you can approach some of this. You guys have got great stories.
I will say, as Emma gets older and we do move into employment and her own place to live, I have no idea when that will be. I just know that's the vision and the goal. When, I don't know, but we're always prepping for that. But I know that as she gets older, I will formalize things. And I'm thinking that Emma and I, primarily Emma, will choose the people that will meet once a month. And somebody will do laundry for a whole month. Somebody will do grocery shopping and cooking for a month. Somebody else will do a social activity once a week. Somebody else will do another social activity once a week. And then every month we're going to rotate roles so that the same person isn't always doing the same thing. And luckily, I think we're going to have enough people. Some people are going to rotate out for a few months and then rotate again. Mm-hmm. So we're probably going to formalize it to that level.
And do you anticipate, and maybe they are already, are there people in the circle of friends that are not family that are part of this future rotation that you see?
Yes, and they are the friends that Emma made all on her own.
Cool. That's really nice. I want to move to an activity for everybody. But before I do that, we had a question that I really want to answer here, and it's about working with children that are tweens or teens. If you haven't started before now in building a circle of support, what are some first steps you might take right now at 18 if some of these steps hadn't been done in advance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you have to ask teachers and the adults in your life for honest feedback about where they think that your child's social skills are. I think you have to have social skills. You have to have some self-regulation. And if you don't, you have to be honest with people and say, these are the behaviors and this is what we're struggling with, but these are the calming strategies that we're using. This is where we're at, and see if those people just have open, honest conversation. Are you willing to help me start this circle of support? I don't really know what I'm doing, but I know that I need help, and I know that my wants to have these other people in his or her life to make things a little bit easier. And frankly, as parents, you need a break too. I mean, you've got to, if you're doing the laundry every week, I mean, you got to the grocery every week. I don't know if the person asking the question is asking strictly about social stuff, but one thing to do is join a sports team. Even if your child isn't very good at it, find something that they may like. It could just be bowling. Put them on a bowling league, swimming, join a rec center, or pay to go into the Kirkwood pool system because it's such a great little area. Look at all the activities that the ARC has. Like, we've participated in the cooking class there, and then COVID hit, but absolutely would have been a place where I would have met kids and parents that I am confident we would have gotten together. There are lots of activities for kids with special needs in St. Louis. Sign up, go, and as the parent, go take your child and feel it out. Feel it out for a couple weeks. See if there's anybody you could chat with, and then start chatting. You start to develop a relationship, and once you feel comfortable, make the ask. All they can do is say no.
I will testify that we have some families that have been sitting on the bleachers for 40 years at our softball and basketball games, who have completely, they know everything about each other's lives. And even if they aren't in a circle of support, they sit there for those hours of the game and share support for each other and resources. So I think that's a great suggestion. Debra, is there anything you would add here?
I would say the same thing. So I have sat on the bleachers. I've sat in the cold. I did fundraising for marching band and fundraising for other activities that my kids weren't even in, because it built that social capital. It built those social relationships with not only the other students, but the other parents. And I've leaned on a lot of those parents over the years. That I was a cookie chairman, I was a Girl Scout leader, a lot of that stuff. And it enriched my life as much as it built those circles for my children and for all of my children, not just my child with a disability. It built it for all of them. It's where my daughter found her husband.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. I do know, I mean, boy, it sounds so exhausting to be in all those extracurriculars, but it is hard work, but great payoff too.
But I will be honest and say,
Erica.
The payoff didn't come for several years to come. Like, I was Emma's primary play date, and it was exhausting. And then when I didn't want to play, she was bored and blah, blah, blah. But all those years of social teaching and all those years of having her involved in activities has increasingly made her more social. And now, as I've said, Emma has made her friends in the neighborhood. And even after we've moved, the kids, the typically developing kids from her old high school, drive here to see her and take her out. So there's huge payoff. And I will be honest, Emma was really hard behaviorally, really, really hard. She had some very outrageous, dangerous, threatening behaviors.
Yeah, I think it's so great for families to hear that there is a payoff at the end of a period of time, and what a comfort to be able to move to the next stage of your life, being able to maybe retire and take a vacation, or even go do something you enjoy doing for an evening, knowing that your family member is happily engaged doing laundry with Aunt Laura, or out taking a driving lesson with their uncle. So what I'm showing you here is a graphic, also from Charting the Life course, called Mapping Relationships. Sometimes I have to write things down to get a really clear picture in my head about who my possibilities are and what do I think that they might do. So I wanted to share this form with you. If you signed up in advance, you got this in your email. If you didn't, you'll get it in your email later, but you don't need this form. You can just start writing down some of these things. But what I want to bring to your attention is the top 3 boxes and the bottom 3 boxes as a unit. When families call me, they are worried about the bottom boxes. Who's going to take care of my person every day? Who's going to be sure that they've got enough money? How am I going to make sure that their that their legal needs are met, that somebody is legally in charge? And those things are important. But the things that are harder and more nebulous that will really support those boxes on the bottom are the ones on the top. And as you've listened to Debra and Erica talk, thinking about who shares love for your family member, who thinks they're funny and caring, and who wants to be at their birthday party, and who is excited when they make an achievement. Those are the people that you are going to be able to lean on, and that your family member is going to be able to lean on. So thinking about those people can really, really produce a great payoff for you in being able to think about, where can I build that? How can I make this, the people that are there right now, how can I appreciate them and be more deliberate in my explaining to them what I need their role to be? And where there's gaps, how can I look ahead and think about, where might I find somebody that would fill this bill? Where would she find somebody that is going to get to know and be able to tell stories about the things that she did during this time, or who are going to know our traditions around the holidays, or the way they like to order at a restaurant? So this form gives you a place to think those things out. Ask your family member with disabilities, ask your other family members, who do they see? Because one thing that happens is mom and dad fill this out and their name's in every box, and there's nobody else on these papers.
Yep.
And it's scary, and it's going to make you cry and be upset. And I don't want that. However, when you see your name in a whole lot of boxes, it should give you a moment of pause, because if something happens to you tomorrow, who else is in the picture? So I want you to think about how to build these opportunities. And a lot of things that Erica and Debra have said are the building blocks. You have to get your family member out there and engaged and participating in lots of activities. You have to be aware of what those are so you can see possibilities. And you have to trust your family member that if they bring a possibility to you, that you don't just automatically squash it and say no, but that you look for whether there's an opportunity there. I had a family once whose son kept wandering off down the street, and he'd be down by a neighbor's house who was tinkering on his car, and they kept bringing him back and getting all upset that he was wandering away from home. But the opportunity there was that he was digging car repair, and this guy had no problem with their son standing there watching him get greasy, and in fact was happy to have him hand him tools and do all these other things. So sometimes we're trying to not be embarrassed and protect ourselves when we could reframe a moment and see that there's an opportunity there. So as I'm talking about this, start jotting down for yourself, who are these people that are available right now today? Are they immediate family members? Are they family members that care about this person, but maybe they're far away? Guess what? We have figured out how to connect with people from far away on so many forms of technology. There's all kinds of ways to make those relationships more consistent, more valuable, so that absolutely we can tap into people that are farther away. Are there neighbors, former teachers, people in your church community or your sports league? Finding those people who are always asking, how is so-and-so? Where is so-and-so? Those are the people that you're going to want to tap into. I really care about you focusing on the top. When we get to the bottom, we'll figure those things out with you. But if you spend some time thinking about, how can I fill these gaps? And then you might have people down below. Maybe there is somebody in your family that really cares about your family member making friendships, and they're going to be somebody that would want to take them to a sporting event, or take them to church every week, or take them to choir, whatever it's going to be. I feel like I can fill this box for a young lady we support at the Ark now, because she recently graduated from high school and she joined my chorus. And I want her to make friends there. So I hope that her mom will put my name in that box because I'm available to navigate some relationships with her. I'm available for some transportation, and that is a role that I value and I feel good about. So you can think about this. I'm going to just ask Debra and Erica if they have anything they want to say, and then we're going to move on, and you can keep working on this after the fact. Debra, your face is up, so I'm going to ask you if you'd like to talk about this at all.
No, and I think your choral group is a great example of it doesn't necessarily have to be work. If you find common things that you enjoy, I mean, that's how I make friends too, is by interest, that we're interested in the same thing, whether it's car repair or I can sing. But some of the things that I enjoy, and if I enjoy them with my child or with my loved one, wonderful. The other thing I think we have to remember in thinking outside the box, and when Sharon talked about technology, is my level of need for social interaction might be very different than my loved ones. And so it's not a judgment that your child's friends, they play Facebook games, or I don't even know, I'm old. They play video games together, or they are on the computer together and they talk. And I know there's lots of concerns about safety with social media, but I found that lots and lots of people are friends through social media and enjoy the same kinds of things and enjoy those conversations. So, there's really no wrong answer.
Yeah, and I know so many people that have remote friends that are only remote friends, and those are true and meaningful relationships for the younger generation. So and I've seen them like reach out to each other and solve problems and take care of each other when something's not going well. So I think that's a really, really great example. Thanks. Erica, are you back? Are you unfrozen?
I'm back. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I just plunged on ahead, but I hated to leave you behind. Did you want to comment on this or on something that you previously wanted to share?
No, I feel like I'm kind of catching up about what you're mapping relationships. Okay.
Yes.
I
We're
don't
just
think
talking about, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Explain a little bit more.
I was just going to say, I've really been focusing with people on really looking at who all these people that care about your family member might be, because so many times we're worried about the day-to-day supports that really are much easier to fill through systems and support services, that we forget that all these boxes are so important.
Yeah.
And I think you've already given great examples about how to think about where you're moving forward and who those next steps might be, like your comments about the condo. You know that you're going to need to start looking at existing friendships and family and maybe new friendships that happen through work that are going to fill some of those next step kind of opportunities.
Yeah. It's good
And
to have
doing it in reverse is helpful too, I think. So who does my family member care about?
Mm-hmm.
They know their traditions. So if I know that Sharon loves her choral group and I know her traditions, she probably knows mine too. So sometimes looking at it backwards is easier.
Yeah, that's
That's
good.
true. Well, and as you said that, it made me think about my brother-in-law who has a disability, but his role in the family is bringing everybody together. And he's the one that organizes social events. And his birthday party was this weekend, and 45 first cousins and their offspring were all together because that's the most important event of the year. And looked around and saw 3 generations of people, and he was the one responsible for that. And because of that, I could like walk through that group and think about who could do certain things and how would I ask them. So I think that's a really key point, looking at the skills that your family member brings to life. And it doesn't have to be something fancy like, some really incredible thing they can do. He hounds people about getting together and is so darn happy when people see each other. Everybody wants to be there. So that is a skill,
Yeah.
and that can be taken advantage of.
Sharon, can I go back to the person who asked the question about their 18-year-old and how do you get started?
Yes, please.
I just want to, I had this thought, which is don't forget about to lean on your teachers. If the child is still in school or they're still receiving, I don't know, SSD, CBVI training, or those job coaches and all those things, lean on those people. Lean on a speech path, an OT that knows your child in a different way than the classroom teacher may know your child, or that a friend's mom or dad might know your child. Those people who provide support to your child in the school setting, they each know your child a little differently because the setting is different. So really lean on those people and be persistent.
Mhm.
You need to be persistent and say, I really need your help. Like, we really are working on these things outside of school. How can you help me help my kid have an activity, play date, whatever you want to call it, with some of the kids in class that my child talks about?
Great.
And ask that teacher, that OT, that speech path, to be the person that introduces you to other people.
Mhm. And if you're in adult settings, there's a couple different routes you can go. If people are in formal services for people with disabilities, then you still have service providers that can fill that gap and help you sort through those relationships. If your family member's more independent, that's where you might have to tap into some of the things that Debra's talking about and encourage them to talk to you about the people that they feel most connected to, and then help them build those relationships. Maybe it's that if they really got some coworkers that they really like, maybe helping them bring in donuts once a week so that they can sit around the lunchroom and visit together is going to build a relationship. Or maybe encouraging them to invite people over for a Cardinals game might be a way to build those relationships. So sometimes people need some problem solving around how to make their friendships blossom. And we're going to talk about that a little bit at the end, but we have to figure out how to create welcome and create welcoming spaces to start to bring people together, because you have to have some kind of relationship to be able to make an ask. And so building relationships is another piece of this. And so that's where I am on this slide. And this is really our last slide today. But often people say, well, I don't have any family or close friends near us, and we don't have these people. What are we supposed to do? And I think both Erica and Debra have done a great job of talking about how to start looking for your opportunities. So in your packet, you have a little bit different circle, but this is the idea of people you can tap into to build your circle of friends or circle of support. So your circle of intimacy are your family that you live with, your closest family members, or the closest people in your chosen family. Given family or chosen family. These are your everyday, they're going to be with me my whole life kind of folks that you can really lean on heavily. And then you've got an outer circle of friendship, which is still a pretty close relationship. And it's reciprocal, which Erica mentioned earlier. It goes both ways. So if you want to be friends with me, you better ask me to do some things periodically. You better at least remember my birthday and call me. There's things that have to happen for people to truly have friendship. So that second circle is not quite as intimate as number one, but it's still pretty close. And your circle number three are some of the other things we've been talking about. Sports leagues, cooking classes, school, places where you're physically present, but you have different levels of relationships. But physical presence is important. If you're not there, you don't have this at all. So you want to be out, being engaged in activities and seeing who are the people that start to come around and visit with me regularly? Who are the people that laugh at the same jokes I do? How do I figure that out? And then circle of exchange, those are really your more professional relationships. The people that you do something for, or that they do something for you and you do something for them, like pay them, where it's a very relationship built more on what you can do for each other rather than how much you care about each other. There's nothing wrong with those relationships. In fact, Debra told me a story recently about introducing her son to their banking manager. And Debra, maybe you can jump in and talk about how you actually leveraged somebody in circle number 4 to be a kind of a regular supporter of your son.
Yeah, so some of these big financial decisions, again, maybe I'm not even the best one, even if I am around. So going to the bank and actually asking for help, sitting down at someone's desk and asking for help and explaining the situation. Since Sharon, since you and I have talked about it, there have been 2 other incidences where that person has been a support financially. So sometimes it is just about asking. And when someone says, here's my business card, you can call me, believe them, thank them, be grateful, and be that person for someone else.
And I would add to that, find a reason to call them. Find a reason to call them so that they remember who you are and you can start to build that relationship. I don't know why I thought about this, Debra, but while you were talking, I thought about the fact my mom still likes to go into the bank so that she can talk to the tellers to get her stuff, which is such a old-fashioned thing to do. But you know what? I bet if I needed to, I could go in and leverage that relationship because she goes in to get her cup of coffee and talk to them every week. Mm-hmm. So the other piece of this slide on the left is just a little graphic, and this is something we teach our staff because a lot of times for that circle of participation, we'll send folks out to go to church, go to a class, go to do something, and the staff says they didn't like it, they don't want to do it, and they don't want to take them back. And I just want to walk through the way we all start to build our connections to people. When you walk in the door, all you really have is presence when you go to a new place. When I joined my chorus, I sat there and did not talk to one person. I watched how they interacted with each other. I watched how the rules were about how they learned music and how they decided when you turned your music in and when you didn't. And I learned a whole lot about what was going on. And I actually told myself, you're going to go 4 times because you're really, really nervous and you're going to be nervous for the first 2 times at least. So you have to go 4 times before you make a decision one way or another. So weeks 2, 3, I started talking to the person that was sitting next to me. And maybe at the snack time, I made small talk with somebody. And I really just started to interact with them a little bit. It took a long time before I was really actively participating, where I felt like I was really singing as part of the choir. I knew people's name. I felt like I had something to do and I looked forward to going and participating. And the final step is belonging. And that's when I don't show up, that they call and say, where is she? Why didn't she come tonight? And that if I don't show up, our part's not going to ring right because I'm not there to sing and add my voice to it. So we all do this. This is human nature. So for us to expect something different for people with disabilities that might have more challenges with social skills and more challenge with learning activities, we're just cheating them out of the opportunities of relationships. So be comfortable with people being in presence. Maybe they just want to sit at the bar and look at people for a month. fine. Just go every single Tuesday night because somebody else is a regular. Somebody else is going to notice you're sitting on that bar stool or that bench at the baseball game or wherever you're going. And then look for interaction opportunities. Take it slow. You may stop there and that's where that place ends, but there's going to be places where you end up following through the whole line. That was my speech for the night. So I'm going to close my PowerPoint while Debra or Erica say anything they want to on this.
I guess it could feel for some parents that it's overwhelming, especially like the family who asked about, well, if my child's 18, how do I start that now? I think it could feel really super overwhelming. I guess the two things I want to say is it can be. So reach out to your own support network, whoever that is that you are vulnerable and can say and be whoever you are, and that person has no judgment and no condemnation. And put one foot in front of the other and do it. It's hard, but the payoff is enormous. But if you don't do it, then it's possible that life just might be a little bit harder. So I guess really that's all I wanted to say. Just reach out to people, make sure you're doing your own self-care. That's kind of like a hot term right now, but if that means you need to do whatever it is that you do for self-care so that you can then take care of your child and do all those hard things, I suggest do that. But it's possible and it's okay. You'll get there. It's okay.
One foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
Debra, anything you want to add?
The same thing. I think it's hard for us to ask for help. Sharon and I had the same discussion. I call my mom at 6:30 every night, had to call her early tonight because of this. And she told me how she went in the bank because she needed to talk. And, she's now learning to ask for help and set parameters around that as well. And I think it's hard for us to ask people for help with things. We tend to be super parents and super family members, and we want to just plan everything and make everything right. And so being vulnerable and saying, I have to build my own circle of support. I don't know everything. I need help with decision making as well. I need people to lean on. I need somebody to drive me home from the hospital, and I don't have a person. And so building those circles yourself is a good learning experience that you can take your family member with you and say, see, mom didn't have it, dad didn't have it, Aunt Debbie didn't have it either, but I'm doing it now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, we adapt as human beings. My mom, I've been very worried because some of her closest friends have either passed away or moved. And so the people that used to be in the center of that friendship circle are not really there. But I'll tell you what, she has made some new friends at 86. And she's made more of an effort to engage some of those friendships. So it's never too late. It's about, again, going back to what is it this person loves? Where are those experiences? How can I get them out there and give them the chance to meet new people and make new friends? And then once they have made a connection, how can I support that? So one of the things that somebody asked was about more formal meetings where you might get together to talk about futures planning and where things are going. And I wanted to share a couple of examples that are in a book I found called the Circles of Support Manual that I'd be happy to share anybody, but it really talks about kind of how to ask. Make sure you know what you want to ask, be clear about it. Don't ask people at a bad time for them when they're stressed or in the middle of work or whatever else. Don't be offended if people don't want to join your circle. But here's some examples of using written invitations that really let a whole group of people know look, we're transitioning. This is the end of school and we're going to start a new journey here. And we want to gather everybody together to plan and dream and think about what's going on. So I think that's a nice invitation. Here's one for a younger kid to talk about the kid's future. And it spells out exactly what we want to start happening. We want to start building opportunities in the community. And here's what's going to happen during that day. And here's another one that's a little more simple, that they just want your wisdom. What a nice thing. If somebody told me they wanted my wisdom, I'd probably be jumping to go and run to their house and try and be wise for a moment. So those are some examples that I thought were really cool that I wanted to share with everybody. One of the questions we had very early was to ask how you would ask somebody to become a guardian for your adult with special needs. And, I think part of it is having all these little asks well in advance so that people have roles. But I wonder, Erica, as you're a guardian now, how you think about that.
It's frankly, I'm scared. She's 18. We actually go meet an attorney tomorrow and have to write up, what happens if I go and her dad goes, if we pass away, who do we think can be the next guardian? Should it be co-guardians? So we are literally been talking about this for a long time, and tomorrow is the day, and we still don't know.
Well, and just because you decide, whatever you decide tomorrow, it isn't a lifelong commitment. So
right, you can always amend your paperwork, but I think what we know will be true is what you just said. The people that we will ask to be co-guardians are people that have been in her life from the very beginning and who have shown the most interest and have been the most predictable and reliable, and not just in showing up, but in showing love. They may not have all the things that we wish they would have, but above all else, they show love. They're not afraid to show love. And Emma needs it. Emma needs to see and feel love above all else. So that is the basis for which we will make this decision, and just have to have faith that the rest will work out with help from other people in the circle and family members that may not exactly be in the circle, but still love her. So it sounds a little pie in the sky, but after much deliberation and discernment, I think that's our best choice for our child.
I know Deb wanted to talk about this supported decision-making guide, so I'm going to just open that real quick.
So Sharon and I use this as a tool when we do alternatives to guardianship and supported decision-making training. And I think this is really a nice, and again, it's a Charting the Life course tool. It's really a nice tool to kind of go through, because even if your child has a guardian, to teach them some of these skills, to help them learn how to make some of these decisions around these different life domains is so vitally important. I think sometimes we have a false sense of security with if you make all the decisions that everything is always going to be okay. And I go back to the friend who was her daughter's guardian, but she had a job. And so when she got off work, she bought alcohol. And it was really contraindicated to some medication she was taking because no one asked for her guardianship. It was a real eye-opener for that family to sit down and really talk about some of these things and talk about, you may not be able to make these decisions yet. You may need some help. Let's get there. Let's work through as many as we can. And if I'm not the one that can help you with these decisions or to think through some of these areas, who might be that person? Who do you pick to be the person to work on some of these issues with you? There's also that formal supported decision-making agreement that we have now that kind of goes through that. So if you've got your circle of support
Oops.
And it goes through and you can get it notarized, and it says, I would like Sharon to help me make my medical decisions, but I don't want her to be involved in helping me with my finances. And it goes through all of, again, those kind of life domains, including school, for educational decision makers. And you can, again, it's a really purposeful way to sit down and say, here are some of the areas. There's one that's an open-ended one where you can just fill it in. And there's another one that asks a lot of those questions. I think it's helpful for families sometimes to have the ones that have some structure to it to get you started. Again, there's no wrong way to do it, but it helps you get started, and it helps put some structure and some, again, you can get it notarized, some legal teeth behind who's helping your child, and having them really part of that decision-making process. At the end of that agreement, it also says that Sharon is going to agree to help me with that decision. So it's not just.
So I have to sign that I'm on board.
Yeah. So again, it really is about having those open, honest discussions about, will you be my person to help me with this? And this is what I'd like. And you say yes. So I think it's a really powerful tool that families can use, or not.
And Nancy mentioned in the chat that you also can clarify your wishes through a letter of intent that will really help kind of lay out the groundwork for whoever you do make that ask from. But it is a very difficult decision, and I think it would be an incredibly hard decision to make without already having an identified group of people that you really relied on, not just for decision making, but for sharing your life. Because I think that's when it gets really tricky, is if you, even your other children without a disability, if they have been kept out of the decision-making loop with your family member with a disability, if something comes up, they aren't going to be prepared for what they might need to do. So my thought on that would be to make sure that whoever you're thinking about asking, that you are really sharing deeply with them about the person with the disability, that the person with the disability is sharing and connected to them in a really meaningful way, because I think it's really important. We have one final question in the Q&A that pertains to what we're talking about. It was, how do you as a parent manage the circle? What if somebody steps out of bounds, so to speak? How would you handle it? I don't know if either one of you want to tackle that. Erica, you sound like a straightforward, straight shooting kind of gal. I bet you would know.
We've had that experience.
Okay.
Where somebody stepped out of bounds. And fortunately, they knew they did. And they got to me before Emma told me. And I had to, really take a deep breath and listen to what they had to say. And then I actually had to say, I need a day. Like, I need a day before I can really have a conversation with you. So the next day we were able to have this conversation, and the person is still in the circle, and it's never happened again. And it took some time for me to trust again too, that they won't make that kind of mistake again. They were incredibly remorseful. I made sure that there was a repair to the relationship with Emma. That was the most important thing, that happened. Some restorative, activity of some sort. And then I just needed some time to get over it and decide what I wanted to do. And ultimately it was to keep the person in the circle.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'll just say that.
We all have done that. We've all made poor decisions in friendships and relationships, in jobs, and all of that. And using those experiences to then talk to your loved one about, if this person overstepped bounds and led you down a bad path, did you feel it? Did you know it? And if not, what are some of the things we should be talking about so it doesn't happen again? Because I may not be here to problem solve that with you. But if you've gone through it and we have figured it out, maybe you have a better chance of knowing and being able to take care of it yourself, and to have those boundaries, and to be able to advocate for yourself and say, I'm not going to spend my money that way. I appreciate that you think I should, but I'm not going to do it, or whatever else the topic is.
Yeah.
I think I heard what you said. I am a straight shooter, but it is my child, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can for her. The other side is that I am incredibly appreciative of all of these people, and I make sure that they hear it and that they feel it from me regularly. I do really, really appreciate those people. And I think it's important that they understand the level of gratitude that I have for their presence in our life. It's not just Emma. I mean, they're helping me too. And I think because of this circle of friends, my relationship with Emma is better because Emma's her real girl. She's the real Emma when she has all these people in her lives. So then I get the real Emma and she gets the real mom. So our relationship,
and you get to be
so
mom and not mom and best friend and caregiver
and teacher.
I really, and I didn't mean to imply that you were going to go after him. I think though it's so important.
I know.
I mean, I think that's a really important thing, to be able to be honest about your emotions, because if you're going to have that circle of people, it has to be real. And so I think it's beautiful that you're recognizing them and letting them know how important they are to you. And that also then gives you comfort and permission to say, wow, that was really not okay. And I think that's hard for a lot of us to do, especially in the social servicey teachery field, but that's really something we all want to start building our skill set towards. And I also love, Debra, that you immediately look at that bad opportunity as a time to reframe and pivot and make it a teachable moment for your child to say, did you feel that? I want to make sure when something feels wrong in your gut, that you can trust it. And that's a wonderful as well, because you are always thinking about him taking the lead and taking care of that next time if you don't happen to be there.
Yeah, we've done way too much of compliance many times with our children. And so as they become adults and are out there and are away from us, they really do need to learn how do I stand up for myself, and how do I know when I need to stand up for myself, and how to do it, and who to go to for help.
Somebody asked about whether they were making an assumption that an ARC employee could not be in a circle of support. And I just want to say that there's no expectation that an ARC employee would be in a circle of support, that it's really going to be an individual kind of a situation. And if you want that person to be in the circle, it would be as a friend, as a colleague at work, as something other than a paid support person. So making sure that you're really clear about what expectations and work you might have, that would be really important. Don't be offended if they say, I can't do that right now. Some employees have different professional boundaries than others, particularly if they're paid therapists. They have their own therapeutic boundaries that they can't cross. So you don't know why the answer is no. Maybe they've got way more stuff going on in their personal life than you're aware of. But there are many of us that have long-term relationships with people, or people that we just click with because we have a similar interest, or something about them hits us in the heart. We're happy to be engaged, and our engagement may ebb and flow, but those opportunities are really important to us outside of work. So that's something you can certainly consider. I am very happy with how this has gone. I found some materials as I was getting ready, so I'm probably going to put some things together and maybe we'll circle back to this conversation because I don't think it's a one and done conversation. I hope Erica and Debra, you'll come back and talk about this with me again. If there's, I'm going to give you a chance, if there's anything else you want to say about Circle of Friendship, Circle of Support, please, this is your chance. So Erica, how about you?
It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Now I feel like I'm pretty much on the other side of it, and it feels really good to have people in our lives and that Emma is so fond of and that I trust.
Debra.
I'm just always happy to connect with other families in any way that we can learn from each other. My experience has been that the parents that I've met through my experiences are some of the very best people that I know, and I've learned a lot from all of them. So thank you, Erica. I learned from you tonight, and I appreciate everyone taking time to be with us.
I did want to tell people the book I'm referencing is called Circles of Support, and it comes from our friends down south in Australia and an organization called Resourcing Inclusive Communities. Bye.
Thank you.